Okay, so welcome to today's webinar, The Journeys from Postdoc to Principal Investigator. I would like to start by acknowledging the Ojangri peoples of Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which I work and pay my respect to their elder past and present. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people throughout Australia, given that our webinar participants might come from different places across the nation. The aim of today's webinar is to learn about core foundational skills needed to become an independent researcher, and we will hear from highly esteemed principal investigators from the UK and Australia. This webinar has been organized by the ADNES Accelerator Group. Our aim is to support and advocate for early and mid-career Australian dementia researchers and help develop future research leaders. Just to note that the webinar is being recorded today and will be made available to view on the ADNES website. I am joint chair today. My name is Dr. Tuấn Nguyen, Associate Professor from National Aging Research Institute and Swinburne University of Technologies. I am joined by my co-chairs, Dr. Mona Sawan from University of Sydney, Dr. Suraj Santani from University of New South Wales, and Dr. Kelsey Sewell from Murdoch University. It is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker today, Professor Katie Featherstone from University of West London. Katie is a professor of sociology and medicine and director of Scheller Institutes of Aging and Memories, University of West London. Katie's programs of research examines institutional cultures of care to address a pressing national health service challenge, the need to improve the quality and humanities of care people living with dementia receive in hospitals. Funded by the National Institute for Health and Care Research, her detailed ethnographic research involves observing everyday care in hospital wards across England and Wales. Katie has examined the management of refusal care, continence care, with the current project examining the use of restrictive practice in hospital care. These programs of work provides the evidence base which is being used to inform public policy and delivering training, education, and improvement strategies within the NHS hospitals. Katie's strategies of knowledge transfer is identified as notable practice by National Institutes for Health and Care Research. Katie's most recent monograph, Wandering the World, an ethnography of hospital care and its consequence for people living with dementia, is published as part of Routledge Studies in Health and Medical Anthropology series. This is an open access publication available free to download via Taylor's and Frances and Kindle. It was shortlisted for the Foundations for the Sociology of Health and Illness Book Prize 2021, with over 10,000 downloads to date. The book has received favorable reviews, with one recent book review describing it as starkly beautiful book and one that everyone should read. Katie is also founded and leads an NIH-funded ECR mentoring scheme and collaborates with Alzheimer's Research UK to support research capacities in the fields of dementia. Katie, over to you.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction, Tuan. Hi, everybody. I shall start by showing my slides. I'm from, in the UK at the moment, so it's very early here, so bear with me if my voice gets a little bit croaky. I've got drinks and everything, but I'm just warming up. Right, here we go. Can you all see that? That work?
Perfect.
Great. Okay, so I really started working in terms of supporting ECRs when I realized that actually for me, it was a really, really difficult journey. So it's really thinking about what's helped me, but also what's been helping other people. So it's over a number of years that I've really built through some of the key foundational things that you really need. Lots of ECRs come to me with plans for starting, writing that grant, writing that fellowship. And for me, it's quite often to go, yes, fantastic, but actually take a step back and think about what are the key foundational skills you need for independence first. And yes, I really learned the hard way. It's a tough journey, and it continues to be. There are lots of up and downs in academia. It's just the way it is. But there's also a lot of kind of the hidden codes and privileged knowledge in academia that people don't share. So I really want to break that down and actually go, let's start sharing those hidden codes, those skills, those things that you need, so that actually we're all on the same playing field and they can be used. And yes, and I'm really, all of the things I'm going to talk about today is things that I talk to in 2 mentoring groups that I run with large groups of ECRs working in the field of dementia, funded by NIHR, but also Alzheimer's Research UK. So yes, I've done a lot of this work, so I'll switch. I won't really focus on this slide too much, but really just to say that once you have these foundational skills, it really does give you that boost, so you can apply to be a successful applicant on a grant. You can obtain fellowships, but also it's not just about those big notable successes. There's also a lot around those kind of the less tangible but really, really important parts of moving from ECR to established researcher, and that's about developing networks, interdisciplinary collaboration, supporting each other, but also some really core skills around how you manage others, negotiate, how you deal with power dynamics and all of those sorts of things, which are, again, very hidden, but are really part of our everyday experience being an academic. And yes, and I do currently mentor and coach a large number of early career researchers in groups and individually from across the disciplines. And so these foundational skills are really apply to everybody. There's no one where we'd say, oh yes, that wouldn't apply for you. They're all really, really relevant. So here are some of the kind of key skills that we always cover. Finding your unique contribution to the field, and I'll go through these in a bit more detail. Your planning, your strategy for your career, negotiating skills, thinking about your CV, always updating that, creating and selling your story, boundary setting, and also importantly, self-care. We all have those feelings of feeling overwhelmed, and how can you avoid that burnout? And it's only once you have all of these that you're really in a strong place to move on to leading a grant application or a fellowship. You've got those foundational knowledge and things in place. So networks. This is so important, and it's never too early to start this, and it's something that you have to keep working on throughout your career, and the importance of building your network of support. Academia can be incredibly isolating. We all feel that at times. So really think about how you can build a network to support you. But it's also about being strategic about those choices. It's not just about finding your friends and sticking with them in your own department. It's actually about reaching out. So being strategic in your choices. Who do you need to help you in building your career? Yeah. These people, and it's also not just one person. You need a group of people, okay? You need that network. And they should have many different roles for you. So one person might be the expert on grant writing. There might be a few people that you go, they're going to be my referees going forward for all those things in my career. Yeah, that person who might understand a bit more about your discipline. They might be well networked in your discipline. So really think about those, but also consider issues around trust, hierarchy, and thinking about how you move from being someone who might be a junior person to developing that relationship. So it's a relationship, yeah? But also peer groups. You need those peers around you. get into those good habits of having regular meetings, regular touching in with people. So you never want to be in that position of you haven't spoken to someone or emailed them in a year and you suddenly want that reference. Yeah. Have a habit of just checking in with people, making that connection. Yeah. Regular meetings, regular just connections, but also think about how you can support other people as well. There's something about mentoring and coaching others that actually really reinforces the things you need to do for yourself. Yeah, it's not something that is just an outward thing. It actually builds those skills and reminds us of the things we need to do. As I'm giving this talk, I'm going, there are a few things I need to update as well. So it's always a process that you're working on. So yeah, that recognition and reinforcement, and also look for role models. Who is it that you see is someone who's leading? Yeah, for me, I have regular lunches and dinners and drinks with a lot of my mentors and coaches. Yeah, I had a professional coach for a couple of years, and that really boosted me. But then all of my mentoring coaching is with my wider network. Yeah, and I just keep that ticking on, and I really, really need it. I still need it all the time, and I also reach out to other people. So, for example, I now run an institute, so I now have an amazing senior academic who has really helped me with how to lead that, how to build that. He's got a massive institute of 100 people. I've got a tiny little institute, so but he can still give me a lot of the skills and support me in developing. One also key thing is they should all be outside of your department and your institute. Yeah, you need those networks outside. If you stay in, then it's going to hinder your independence. So forge those networks nationally, internationally, make those connections. Yes. So, for example, I've got a great colleague in New Zealand. She's built an amazing collaboration of colleagues who she brings together on Zoom. We're now a really close network, but she built that. She said, these are the people I want. And she brought us together. We actually didn't know her before. We didn't know each other, but you can actually build those connections. And it's very, very powerful. We support her, but she also supports us. As a network, we support each other. So a really key thing you need is developing your unique contribution. So this is really about thinking about your focus. A focus strategy that can really inform your decision making. But it also means you're ready for other things. You're ready for the job market. You're ready to respond to academic challenges, developing the skills and negotiation to keep your space. So your unique contribution is really that thing that goes, I'm all about this. My focus is this area. It's very easy to be drawn by all sorts of the wide range of areas in our discipline and in the research field. There are so many things we could all look at. There are so many funding calls that are constantly popping up in our emails going, apply for this, apply for this. And you can easily be pulled towards that. Also by other people going, join this, do this. If you have your unique contribution, that short phrase, it tends to be something like a short paragraph, or if you can do it in one sentence, that's fantastic. But it normally takes a short paragraph. But if you have that unique contribution, then it gives you focus. It establishes your focus so that when those things pop up, when people ask you for things, or hey, join this group, you can actually go, does it fit in my focus? Does it fit? Does it contribute to this? If it does, that's great. But if it doesn't, then actually you can go, that's not quite for me. Yeah. So you can keep your focus. I quite often have ECRs come to me with, when I say, what are you interested in? It's a massive list. There's 2 pages of things, and that's fantastic because that shows your creativity. But you have to narrow it down and go, what do I want to contribute? But also thinking about strategically about where is the field heading? What are the areas that are going to build? So you don't want to box yourself in too closely, but you want to give yourself some wiggle room for the things to emerge, because of course government priorities change, funding priorities change. So give yourself some flexibility, but it's really, really important to have that sense of, this is my plan, this is what I'm going to contribute to the field as an academic, as a researcher. So it's also taking that and then having that vision and really thinking about, well, what does that mean in 5 years? Every academic, every researcher should have a 5-year plan. Yeah, what is the vision? Where do you want to head to in that longer term? But what can you do in these 5 years? Yeah, what do you want to be known for? So developing the 5-year plan, this really helps you, as I said, to move from being reactive to strategic, to stop that reaction, that looks amazing, I could do that, I could do this, to actually being strategic in every choice. In every choice, from those bigger questions of, do I do that grant, do I join that team, to the really simple ones around that email that comes through saying, can you lead this or can you join this? Really think through, does it fit? Does it fit with what you want to be doing? Does it fit your 5-year plan? So with a 5-year plan, you can do that larger, what do I want to achieve then, and where does it get me? And that might be the next stage in your career. It might be about reaching independence or promotion, that kind of thing. But then you can work back. Once you've got that bigger point of where you want to go, that destination, you can really work back and really think about, okay, what are the immediate goals? What are the long-term things? And you can really start to work through what you need to achieve that. And that can be down to that, what can I do in the 6 months that will really give me that boost? What can I do in this year that will give me the boost? And that might be around the foundational things you need before you write that grant or fellowship. It might be around publications, networking, having some pieces of work completed, but things that you can actually are really tangible and doable and you can tick off. Yeah, I think it's always good to have that sense of, in this 6 months I can do these things. But I cannot emphasize enough the power of having that plan. Yes, and also keep going back and refining and readjusting. You know, I look back at my plans. I've got a whole book where I keep my plans for the year and the bigger picture, but also the immediate things. And I'm constantly adjusting as well. I probably don't do that as much as I should at the moment because I'm thinking about other people, a group of people. But I will be looking at that definitely over the Christmas holidays and really thinking through and thinking, where do I need to go next? Yeah, my kind of September and then Christmas is where I start to do that readjustment. So yes, so it's thinking about those immediate things, about what's missing in your CV, but it's thinking about what you need for those priorities for independence. And quite often you do need to start off with just a brain dump, just really put down all the things you want to do and work it through. This should be a messy process. Yeah, it should be really making you think about what you want to be and what you want to do. Yeah, that bigger vision can be hard to find, but I think you really need to work through that, the bigger vision, and then actually what do you need to achieve that? Really break it down into tangible things. So what this gives you, it gives you a document to revisit, adjust, develop. But something really, really important is saying no. It gives you the power to say no to things. Quite often we feel we can't say no and we should take every opportunity, but really think through what what works for you, what will contribute. Sometimes we can't say no, but we do need to think about how we, is this something that we can actually say no to? Can we say, actually, that's not for me at the moment? It also gives you focus. Yeah, focus is everything. The more the more focused you are, the more powerful you are. So you move from that being reactive to actually then more powerful. Actually, people come in and see your vision. They get attracted to that having that strong focus. Yeah. So actually, the gravity shifts. You move from being someone who wobbles around and can be drawn in to someone who actually pulls people in. And that's really, really powerful. Yeah. It gives you focus. It gives you the focus to really stop that mission drift, to stop that what do people want of me? What do other people think? Yeah. And I think a lot of people, and I think I felt that as well, that sense of, what does my department want of me? What does my line manager want from me? And actually gives you the power to say, actually, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm doing here. Yeah. So really think about how you can have that solid place in, this is who I am in the world, and this is what I'm going to focus on. A key thing that I think for me was a real changing point was understanding the power of negotiation. Okay. And I think this is something that is really, really important. So Getting to Yes was a really important book for me. I've only ever read chapter 1, but it changes the way you think about all the emails that come into your box, giving you things to do from your line manager, from your department, from all sorts of people. And it's thinking about how you, it takes the emotion out of the process, but also thinks about actually every encounter in academia is a negotiation. So it's how to think about actually how you have power in this process. Yeah. So I really would encourage you all to see every encounter in academic life and research is a negotiation. So really start to think about developing those skills. And what does success look like? Well, I did have a vision when I moved into dementia research about 8 years ago, and I did have a big vision of the things I wanted. And actually, a lot of those things I wrote in my vision of what I wanted to do, I actually couldn't articulate and didn't articulate to anyone else. It was almost too much, but there were things I was determined to do. And that focus really kept me going. But I would say there's incredible highs and lows in research. So you have to keep that quite steely focus. You need your networks to really help you through all of that and to be there for you, but also so that you're there for them. We've got to build those networks of support, and also the importance of really looking after ourselves. Academia is tough, so it's also about thinking about how we make sure we don't burn out and we have those healthy habits. Thanks, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Katie, for your great presentation that I have learned a lot. And I will now pass over to our co-chairs to introduce today's panelists. Kelsey, over to you.
Wonderful, thanks, Tuan. And thank you, Katie, that was an incredible presentation. So we'll now move on to our panel discussion. So this will include Professor Featherstone, as well as 4 prominent researchers who have each undergone the journey from being a postdoctoral researcher to a global dementia research leader. So the first one was Professor Naismith, but I think she is not able to join us today. So Suraj, I might pass over to you to introduce Professor Vickers.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. So I'd like to give warm welcome to Professor Vickers. Professor Vickers is a distinguished professor at the University of Tasmania and the director of the Viking Dementia Research and Education Center. And I'll hand over to Mona to introduce our next panelist.
Yeah, be delighted to. So our next panelist is Professor Jürgen Goetz from the University of Queensland Brain Institute. He's Foundation Chair of Dementia Research, Director of the Clem Jones Centre for Aging Dementia Research, NHMRC Leadership Fellow and Ultrasound Team Leader. And in 2023, he became the Leslie Green, Bill and Nancy Green Endowed Chair in Dementia Research. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity to talk about my journey. I mean, firstly, you realize when you listen to me, there's a German accent. And also my name indicates that I didn't grow up in Australia. So I had a long journey, and it was not it was not a straight trajectory. So I grew up in Germany. I did my undergraduate studies in Basel at the Biocenter, studying biochemistry. And then I moved to Freiburg to work at the Max Planck Institute with a Nobel laureate in immunology. From there, I did go to the US to work in developmental biology with Gail Martin. And then I decided to leave academia and go into industry. And so I moved back to Europe, and I worked in Basel for Novartis. At that time, it was called Sandoz. And there I worked in the preclinical research department for 2.5 years. And that's actually where I developed a first model for the tau pathology in Alzheimer's disease. So that was my first exposure with dementia research. But basically up to here, I have always been working with animal models. So first in immunology, then in developmental biology, and ultimately in neurodegeneration. And so I worked in industry, and then I decided to go back into academia, and I worked with Charles Weissman. Charles Weissman is a co-founder of Biogen. So he was amongst the richest Swiss people, but he still lived a very frugal life, so to speak, and he was working hard. And he did things we couldn't do these days. So we had, every Monday and Friday, we had 1.5 hours of journal clubs from 5 to 6:30. And every second week on Saturdays, we had research meetings, or a lab meeting for 2.5 hours Saturday morning. And this is something most likely could not be implemented anywhere anymore. So that's how I kind of grew up. And then I stayed in Switzerland and joined Roganich. And Roganich is the guy who developed the aducanumab antibody. And so that's basically where I've built my Alzheimer's career. And then I was thinking whether I should stay in Switzerland, I should move back to Germany, and we can later on maybe talk about my decisions and why I eventually moved to Australia. But ultimately, I was recruited to Sydney. So there was an interview. It was actually on a day, I think it was a day before, a day after Australia Day. So I came from the European winter, basically being kind of arriving in a festive environment in Sydney, and which was very appealing to me. And so I was interviewed and was offered a job as a full professor at the University of Sydney. And I worked there at the Brain and Mind Research Institute. And then we had in 2010, we had a paper in Cell, which then led to offers from different universities, including the University of Queensland. So I was recruited to the Queensland Brain Institute, to lead the Clem Jones Centre for Aging Dementia Research, which was set up with my recruitment. And because I was recruited to a new place, I obviously got a good startup package, which then allowed me to explore something new, and with my background in Alzheimer's disease, I kind of decided to move into the therapeutic ultrasound space. So we had then 2 years later with my first PhD student, a paper in Science Translational Medicine, which made it onto the cover. And then we have from there, we started a program. So I basically work in the basic neurodegeneration space, but at the same time, we try to explore therapeutic ultrasound as a new treatment modality for Alzheimer's disease. And so we got funding from state and federal government and also from philanthropy, which allowed us to work with engineers with engineering companies and to build a clinical trial ready device. So we recruited an ultrasound program development manager. And so basically I had to leave my comfort zone. I had to leave my comfort zone a few times by moving from country to country to country, first to the US and back to Switzerland, then to Australia. We're moving out of academia in the industry and then back again. But also when we then started this ultrasound project, because I have no engineering background, so we got engineers in the team. At the moment we have just one, but we had for a while, we had 3 engineers and they speak a completely different language. But it was worth the effort. So we have since built a few devices. We have started the clinical trial. And this is an absolutely fascinating journey. And yeah, I think I leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Godson. I apologize, I'll just introduce Professor Wickers again, please. Professor Wickers, please share your journey with us.
Thank you very much for the introduction. My career isn't as multi-country spectacular as Jürgen's, but I'll try and keep it simple. So I did my PhD at Flinders University with Professor Marcello Costa. After that, I had about 12 years as an HMRC research fellow, CJ Martin, then R.D. Wright, and then a senior research fellow. And my CJ Martin fellowship gave me the opportunity to go to do a postdoc with Professor John Morrison at the Mount Sinai Medical Centre. Professor Morrison is now the president of SFN. So we knew he'd turn out well. So that was a lucky affiliation. Then after that, I guess I actually moved back to Tasmania. I was actually supposed to return to Sydney, but I was a bit homesick for Tasmania and decided to move back there, even though really Tasmania didn't have a substantial, I guess, profile in medical research, but it was an opportunity to build one's own program. And after a number of years as a research fellow, I acquired a mortgage, a partner and children. And so I was getting a bit nervous about the cycles of fellowship funding. And so I entered into the dark world of university administration and then moved into what was at the time the chair of pathology. And I have been able to keep up research over the years since, but I have bounced around a number of different administrative roles, including on a couple of occasions now, the administrative head of our School of Medicine. And about 15 years ago, with a good colleague of mine, Andrew Robinson, we created the Wicking Dementia Research and Education Centre, which has now about 50 or 60 or so staff and is active across the areas of education and research. I'm not sure that I have really a lot of wisdom to share with this audience, but maybe a little bit of quick advice. I guess one is, I think in the early days of my career as a full-time research fellow, there were lots of roadblocks. So the difficulty in getting funding. And so what I found quite useful is to really have at least 2 areas of research focus, such that if with one of those areas of focus wasn't having much luck with grants, then we could switch over to the other area to try our luck there as well too. And that got us through, I think, some potentially difficult times. The other one too is there's been a bit of mention already of mentors and coaches, which is good, is get as many of those as you can. But what's even more useful, I find, are people I might describe as sponsors. So these are colleagues, senior colleagues who will be in your corner if you might need them to do something on your behalf, and may well be working in your interests and to help support your research behind the scenes as well too. So they're like a mentor, but they'll actually go out and do things for you. And I've certainly benefited from having some excellent sponsors, especially in those first years as a research fellow. And I think, as also previously mentioned, you're building your own network. So particularly your peer networks, because these will be your friends and colleagues for many years to come. And you don't know when you might need to call on them for help and a bit of support too. So I think developing and fostering those networks is actually a really really, really important thing. So I might leave it there to give other people a chance to talk.
Thank you so much, Professor Vickers. And finally, our panelists, last but not least, I'd like to introduce Associate Professor Louise Newton. She is a public health researcher with a focus on epidemiology, assessment, prevention, and treatment of alcohol use and related disorders across the lifespan. She's a program lead in lifespan and brain health research at the Matilda Centre, University of Sydney. Louise's current program of research focuses on understanding the cognitive impacts of alcohol exposure during gestation, adolescence, and older adulthood. So I'll pass it over to you. Thank you very much, Louise.
Thank you, Kelsey. And as a newly minted PI, I actually have slides to share with you. So I'm hoping you can all see those. Excellent. So thank you so much for having me. I have two key takeaways from my journey from postdoc to PI. And the first is that having generous and supportive supervisors or mentors is incredibly important. And the second is that it took me a really long time to find or identify my research niche, that unique contribution that Professor Featherstone was talking about. For many, many years, when people asked me what I did at dinner parties, my standard and pretty uninformative response was research. Researchers are often at the whim of which job applications are successful, which grants are successful. So you may feel like a jack of all trades for some time. And I'm here to let you know that, at least in my case, it all turned out fine. So I finished my PhD in 2012, where I had the most amazing, generous and supportive supervisors. We've got Marie Thiessen and Tim Slade up there. My PhD focused on alcohol use disorder in young adults, and my wonderful supervisors actually included me as an investigator on an NHMRC grant focusing on this topic. So I already had a major grant by the time I completed my PhD. Almost immediately, though, after submitting my PhD in 2012, I also had my first change in research focus. I moved to the clinical research unit for anxiety and depression to work with Professor Gavin Andrews on internet-delivered interventions for anxiety and depression. So if anyone has had the pleasure of meeting Gavin, you'll know he is incredibly dynamic and absolutely brimming with ideas. So he set me to work writing paper after paper after paper, which is really what you need early on in your postdoc, is to get the number of first author publications ticking over. I finished after several failed attempts at fellowship applications. I was successful in 2014. And as part of this fellowship, I tried to consolidate my research program and embarked on a project combining substance use, mental health, and online interventions. But before I could do that, my first daughter was born, and I had another temporary career change as a full-time mum for 12 months. In 2015, I moved back to the National Drug and Alcohol Research Centre with my old supervisors to begin work on my fellowship. And I got experience running my own RCT and developing my own cognitive training program. In 2016, I received my first CIA grant. This was from the Department of Health, and it was to conduct a review of alcohol use prevention strategies. I was also included as an investigator on a large NHMRC grant led by Tim Slade, which was a bit of a return back to my old PhD work. And I was very happily promoted to senior lecturer. In 2018, I was included as an investigator on a large NHMRC grant, which focused on school-based prevention for alcohol use and mental health in adolescents. And this was led by my supervisor, Marie Thiessen. I also got another CIA grant focusing on alcohol use prevention in adolescents. So I was beginning to think that I had found my niche, my unique contribution. I was now an expert in transdiagnostic online interventions for adolescents. In 2018, I also received a UNSW Scientia Fellowship, which was really exciting. But again, I delayed taking that up when I had my second bub and went back to my old career of full-time mum for another 12 months. Now, while I was on parental leave, my research centre moved from UNSW to the University of Sydney and became the Matilda Centre. This was really exciting, but I had a really difficult decision to make. I could move with my team to USyd and give up my UNSW Scientia Fellowship, or find a new team at UNSW and see what my fellowship might bring. So I decided to stay at UNSW, and that's when I started to work with Parminder Sachdev at the Centre for Healthy Brain Ageing. This was all very exciting, but there was one problem. I had almost no expertise in brain aging. I decided to give it a go under really strong mentorship and guidance from Paminda. So I took the research that I'd done, focusing on adolescents and young people, and applied that to older adults. So now my program of research, my unique contribution was to focus on the epidemiology and prevention of alcohol use in older adults. And this turned out to be a pretty good move. I was successful in getting a CIA grant focusing on my epidemiology work, as well as one focusing on my intervention work in older adults. And this program of research was looking promising. I didn't want to think about how I would try and consolidate it with my new Department of Health grant, which focused on developing an online portal of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders for primary school teachers. So that was a problem for another day. And now to where I am now. I am a very newly minted PI. In 2023, I was promoted to Associate Professor. I was offered a tenured position at USyd, and I moved back to my old research team at the Matilda Centre. I was very lucky to receive CIA funding from NIH and from the Department of Health, and I continue to collaborate with Paminda at the Centre for Healthy Brain Aging on another NIH grant here. So I currently hold CIA funding focusing on prenatal alcohol exposure, on adolescents and alcohol use, and for a trial of my online alcohol intervention for older adults. So how do I consolidate these into a single program of research? Well, now when someone asks me at a dinner party to elaborate on what type of research I do, I tell them I am an expert in understanding and preventing risky alcohol use across the lifespan. Thank you.
I would really like to thank you all for amazing, successful stories. And I now would like to pass on my co-chair to lead the Q&A session. Suraj, over to you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing your journeys. Very inspiring and helpful tips from everyone. So thank you. And what we'd like to do now is to ask the panel some questions. So can I please ask all our attendees to post some questions into the Q&A? While that is happening, I would like to start off with a question for our panel, which is, what was the turning point for you to move from postdoc to PI? What did you do?
It's pretty recent in my head, so I could go first here. It was getting CIA funding, really. That was the to be able to support a team of researchers working on your program of research, I think was a turning point for me.
For me, it was receiving funding from industry. So basically, I joined Sandoz and was thinking I would maybe stay, but then they kind of liked what I was doing, and in the end, they gave me support to hire a postdoc when I transitioned back into academia. And at the same time, having been exposed to industry was a great experience because I kind of knew how industry operates. And so I had subsequently, I received a lot of funding from industry. I had, when I was in Zurich, I had a grant which was at that time a lot of money. It was more than $1 million Swiss francs for a grant which you could basically invest with no strings attached. It was the biggest grant ever I got from industry, I have to say, unfortunately. But that was, and I tried to maintain my links in the industry since then.
And mine was almost a dreadful mistake, which luckily turned out okay, which was that I had an HMRC CJ Martin Fellowship. And those fellowships, I don't think they exist anymore, but they pay you to go overseas for 2 years and then back in Australia for 2 years. And then I actually did renege on my original plan to return to the University of Sydney, I think at the time, and to come back to Tasmania, where really there wasn't a lot of brain research going on. So from that first point of moving back to Tasmania, I had to build a lab and scurry around and find funding to set things up and to keep them going. So I was sort of plunged into being a CI probably a little bit too early on in my sort of career journey, but luckily it mostly turned out okay.
Yeah, I think I agree that actually getting your first grant as PI is the key point. But my journey to that was a bit brutal, to be honest. I'd done I had lots of jobs as contract research, and then I got tenure at a different university, and I was running then a big program. So I was very much in big administrative role, and I had that for many years. And it was just, I could combine publications, but I could not combine getting that grant. It was too much to do. It was really, really difficult. And I'd also slightly burnt out from the last area of research I was doing. So I was looking for something new. So it was a combination of, I came to that point where I just really needed to make a change in my career. And I kind of put it all on the line in a way. One, I reached out to my network, and I was really, really honest about how happy I was and how difficult it was. So I really was, I stopped the facade and really told people how I felt. And actually, it was surprising how powerful that was, because I got a lot of support, but also senior people who I thought were doing amazingly well also started to share that they were really suffering too. And that was really important for me to know that actually there isn't a point where things really change. Actually, it's always an up and down thing. I then really reached out as well to look for a new area of research. I went out, I got away from my office. At the time, offices were still a thing. And actually went out into the community and talked to people about the research they wanted, what were the things they needed. So that was really, really important to me, to have that network of people living with dementia, carers, that's who I still collaborate with now. And then the other thing, so I'm going to take a bit of time here. The other thing was I then went to my head of school and said, I need to get back to research. And she said, that's great, Katie. You've got a day job. You've got to keep this program going. And I'll give you a bit of help with that. I'll give you some support, but you have a year to get a grant. Otherwise, I'm performance managing you out. And actually, that was really brutal. But because I had those other things, I had that network of people, I had that network of mentors, that kept me going. But yes, it was very touch and go at that point in my career. But getting that grant changed everything for me. But I would totally say it's having those foundations of this is the people who support me that allowed that to happen. It wasn't just me. It's having that network.
Thank you so much for sharing your tips with all of us. It's really good advice. And I'd like to hand over to Dr. Mona Sawan to ask the next question.
Yeah, Katie's point is a great segue to my question, because the panelists, including Katie, you all mentioned the need to network and talk to people in order to, expand your networks, not only nationally, but internationally. And I'm talking to the introverts listening. What kind of advice do you have in order to take the first step to connect with people you don't know? Go on, Katie.
Okay, I think this never goes away. It's very, very hard. Okay, it is. I still have a point of I have the palpitations when I'm sending an email or something. That's totally okay. But I think what I would totally say to everybody is senior people want to help. They absolutely do. And also, they also need to help for their career. So in the UK, if a senior person is going for their own senior fellowship, or they're going for a grant or anything like that, they actually need to show that they're supporting the next generation. So I would see it as a mutually beneficial thing. And absolutely, I wrote a failed application a few years ago, and before my current post, and I absolutely felt those palpitations of, can I ask that person, will they send me a nice email back? And they all did. They were all incredibly generous. And I would really just encourage everybody to just make that leap. And also, if someone doesn't email back, then you don't want to be part, don't want to know them anyway. So move on to the next. But I think, make those connections. Now we can do in-person conferences and things. Go to those conferences if you can. I know that's also hard because funding is tight, but if you can't go to those conferences, send those emails. Don't make them too long. Keep them short and keep them very focused. You want one thing. So we don't want the email that goes everything about me. Keep it short, make it clear you know what they do, and ask them for one thing to start off with. And that might be just an online meeting to learn something about something, or a methodology, or some advice on something. But make that leap. Honestly, people will respond.
Good advice. Any other advice from the panelists? I can see a lot of heads nodding. Jürgen?
Yeah, I think, when you talk about network, obviously part of the network is also your former supervisor. So you may sometimes think, okay, I haven't contacted my supervisor for a while. Now it feels kind of awkward to reach out, but I feel never kind of offended when someone reaches out to me maybe after 1 or 2 years. So when there has been a bit of a gap in the communication, because everyone is busy. So kind of feel free to reach out. And also, more generally, I think sometimes on things one reaches out once and one doesn't get a response, but most people are very busy. So again, it might be good just to reach out a second time, because the fact that someone didn't respond the first time doesn't mean that this person is not interested or not willing to give advice or to help, but it's just that one may have, there's so many things to do, and so you may have missed to get back to a person.
Valuable advice. We do have a few questions from the audience, so I'll hand it back over to Suraj and he can get the ball rolling. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nona. I'd like to start with a question from Dr. Andrew Shoebridge, whose question is related very much to this last topic we were discussing about reaching out to people. And his question is for Professor Wickers, saying, you talked about the importance of sponsors, and Andrew's wondering if you could share more details about that, and connecting with the sponsor. Does a relationship with the sponsor just develop organically through a mentoring relationship, or does it require direct conversation or a direct request for support from the outset?
Sure. So thank you. I guess in my experience, connecting to a sponsor is rather organic. So these tend to be more senior investigators that you meet. You might be on a grant panel. You might have cold emailed them because you like their line of work, or you're traveling to their country or where they live, and you'd like to meet with them. And I think, again, the thing about a sponsor, you probably don't want to force it too much. It usually then relies on some sort of natural, I guess, inclination from the sponsor to assist, I guess, more junior peers. But it can be really effective, because those sponsors can open up opportunities. They can get maybe help organise for you to be a speaker at a conference, or there might be some national committee of some kind that they can get you involved with. And dare I say it, they may see maybe on a panel when your grant comes by. They may not be collaborating with you, but they know you exist and they like what you do. Then again, that could be quite useful. So I think they can do many different things for you. But my advice is probably not to try and force a relationship like that. Just to be a bit brave and to introduce yourself to I guess, again, those, you know, people have been around for a while whose work you like, and for them to know that you exist, and, you know, those sorts of things may well follow. But still also too, my postdoc supervisor in particular has been a very strong sponsor for many years. And so if you need a letter, you know, to help with an application, or you want to be confident that if you're applying for a position somewhere that you're going to get a strong support as well too. So, you know, those good impressions you make in your journey through your postdoctoral years will usually help support you for those many years to come.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to make a very shameless plug for the AdNet EMCR sponsorship program, because there are a lot of ECRs who might feel not confident reaching out to someone that, you know, can be quite scary sometimes. And so we have this wonderful program where you can express your interest in finding a sponsor or a mentor, and we can pair you up with someone. So please reach out if you are interested. And I'd like to go to our next question, which is, does the panel have any tips for maintaining focus when experiencing burnout?
Mm-hmm.
Professor Gotz?
Yeah, I think what I do is basically I have a larger team, and every Friday I send out a roster for the next week. But when I'm kind of allocating time for everyone, maybe to meet everyone every week or every fortnight. But when I have a lot of things to do, what I also do is I reserve time. So I may reserve a complete day or half a day just to focus on things which I need to do. And I think it's important to do that, just to be able to focus on whatever needs to be achieved. So I then don't want to, I try not to be interrupted. So otherwise my day is too fragmented. But from time to time, I think one needs just blocks of time where one can fully concentrate on something, because I think it's easier then to finish a job, and this gives you confidence and satisfaction. That's something which helps me enormously. I have a high workload, and sometimes I think I don't know how to manage. But ultimately, by organizing my time, it helps enormously, because then I can tick things off and know, okay, I've done this, I've done that, and that helps me kind of to continue my job.
Thank you. Professor Featherstone.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I think this is really, really common. It's something that you're going to find throughout your academic career. For me, it's about trying to avoid burnout. Yeah, there's an awful lot to do, and also it just grows. What you know, the workload is just, it's never going to reduce. It just gets bigger. So it's, how can we avoid burnout? How can we get healthy patterns? So I think, you know, going back to the 5-year plan and the things about the plan for this year or for this 6 months, it's about trying to keep resetting the healthy habits. You're never going to get it right, but it's about just kind of, when you realize actually you're getting to that point, how do you reset the healthy habits that really make sure you don't hit the burnout and you're being realistic? And I think, again, the 5-year plan of focus can also, and saying no, can get rid of the things you don't have to say yes to everything. So that can also help. But, you know, one thing that I think really, really important is, in terms of healthy habits, is trying to find those times for you, for all those connections. And I would say exercise is really, really, really important, because that is good for stress, good for helping you regulate. I use it to help me to stop work. I can get really obsessive and just keep going. So I need to have those points in my diary where I'm going and exercising. So it actually stops me. I booked that class, I booked that thing, it's in my diary, I can't not do it. So it's finding your way of making sure you don't hit the burnout. What are the early signs? Okay, so here's another thing. Think of what were the early signs that you knew you were heading to a bit of burnout? Think about those early signs, and then you can stop it before you get to that point. But I think it's something we all struggle with, and we all really need to manage all the time and really think about those healthy habits. But yeah, it's an ongoing thing. But yes, I'd say basically really take care of yourself. Okay.
There's this term of burn on.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for your tips about that. Sure, everyone can relate to that, but I think Professor Vickers also has some advice.
Oh, yeah, just very quickly, and I've seen this a lot over the years, is that postdocs and junior research fellows, people at the beginning stages of building their career, often forget that they're owed holidays. So if you've got that 4 or 5 weeks of holidays each year, I would suggest plan for those. Book them out earlier in the year so that everybody knows that you won't be around, because there will always be grants and due and papers due and administration. But if you've got those breaks planned and everybody knows you're not going to be away, then then that's going to be a healthy thing. And again, just to make sure that you've got interests and hobbies that sit outside your work as well too.
Thank you. Louise.
And I just wanted to say that the way that I have dealt with it in the past is to really think about why I'm doing this job, what I love about this job, because I'm doing it for a reason. It's a difficult job, and there are things that I absolutely love about it. For me, it's actually grant writing and reading all the new papers and coming up with the new ideas. So I make sure that I dedicate some time to doing what I love about this job and really focusing on that. And then the rest sort of falls in place. But I feel for ECRs, it's rough sometimes, but we do have a wonderful job in the end.
I love that advice about finding your intention of why you're doing this in the first place. That's great. And I'm going to hand over to Mona to go through our next few questions. Thanks, Mona.
No worries. So next question is, did any of you face insecurity, unemployment while being a postdoc, and how did you get past beyond that and find your own path? I guess this could also apply to career breaks like yourself, Louise, when you mentioned taking, I think it's really important aspect that when you talk about with juggling, I guess, families and being in PI as well. And I think the right word is balancing.
Yes, balancing work-home life is difficult. I took really long breaks to have both my children. I took 12 months for both of them to make sure that I had that full experience, and I was more than ready to come back to work when at the end of both of those 12-month periods. But it is hard. You have to accept that your publications, everything's going to take a hit. Your trajectory, my trajectory like that. Then during my years off, it goes like this, and then it's back up again. And you just have to accept that is going to happen. And also it's if you're talking about a career break that's not having children, where you're actually not supported by a salary or anything like that, that's a more difficult situation to manage. I think that, again, it's thinking about, what you love, what you value in this work, and searching that out. Yes, that's my advice there.
And does anyone have any advice? You might necessarily not have had a career break, but in this situation where there was a career break that wasn't paid, any advice from the panelists? You said, an incredible thing, Louise, about really kind of honing into why you do it in the first place and sticking to that. Katie?
Hi. Yes, absolutely. A lot of my career was in short-term contracts for research. So yeah, it's brutal. It's really, really tough. So I think my advice was, my big leap was moving from that to then having an academic track. I think in the UK, the problem with that is then you move from doing all your research, or totally research, to then having teaching and research. But of course, teaching and administration always comes first to any department. So then you have the problem of how do you keep your research going? So that's the battle that you have. But I think for me, the kind of key things are just make sure you've got that focus of what you want to do. Make sure your CV is always up to date and ready, and again, those networks that will help you through those tricky bits. But yeah, it is a rocky ride, but there are opportunities. I think that also there are ways that you can actually you can break through and do your own thing. And I think it's getting those. If you have that stability, you have to find those windows so you don't get drowned in teaching and administration, and you can find that space to write that grant. So but when you are a researcher on a short-term contract, make sure you get those publications, you get your name, you get your first authorship papers. You've also got to fight for your corner there as well, so that you can then make that leap to getting that lecturer post.
Really good advice. I have another question just came in. Does any other panelists want to add to that before I move on to the next question?
I guess just very briefly, I think a lot of the people maybe in the webinar today are thinking about how they can maintain a full-time research career, which is usually underpinned by some kind of fellowship. But that is a very difficult way to live your life at the end of the day, because it's a cycle. And you could be a really good researcher, but just miss out because everything's more competitive. So I guess my advice too is also to stay alert and aware to the possibility of, say, moving over to an academic position in Australia, which would involve, I guess, probably have to do teaching and administration, but still, in most universities, still that gives you enough flexibility to maintain your research interests. And we are going to see a big wave of many academics in those current posts leaving. They're getting to the retirement age and moving on. So I think there will be quite a number of these more, balanced academic roles coming up. So yes, great to be a full-time researcher, but tricky to do that for your whole lifetime, because that can be very stressful. But to keep an open mind about those potentially tenurable academic positions that are hopefully going to be at least in an area that your research interests will align with.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Can I also add something which may not be covered by the questions? And that's basically, for me, coming from overseas, what I realize is that a lot of Australian postdocs don't want to move. For example, here in Brisbane, they like to stay in Brisbane. So I think any postdoc needs to ask him or herself a question: what do I actually want to achieve in life? I think the question needs to be raised: do I want to stay in Australia? Do I want to go overseas? Is it advantages for my career if I go overseas or not? Because there's a pro and con. When these days one can stay easily connected, but when I did a postdoc way back, when I studied, I would go to the US, but you were basically cut off from the job market back in Europe, and so you would have to go back, and then you have to re-establish connections. I mean, obviously this has changed these days, so the job market is more transparent. So I think one needs to raise the question: what do I actually want to achieve, and also what do I like about my job? I mean, looking forward, what would I like to pursue? Just to give an example from as far as I'm concerned, about myself, when I was applying, for example, in Germany for professorial positions, because I've always been working with transgenic animal models, I would go, for example, to a place, and I would be keen kind of to use transgenic models as my technique, as something which defined me as a researcher. But I would come, for example, to a place which didn't have the which didn't have the funds, where we didn't even have an animal facility. So in order to cater my wishes, we would have had to build a facility in the first place. So kind of financially, it was not a possible. It was just not possible. And so I think as a postdoc, I also need to think, okay, what do I actually want to pursue as I look forward? Do I want to, let's say I may work with mice, do I want to continue working with this species? Or am I really interested in dementia research? Is this something I'm burning for? And I think one needs to ask this question honestly and spend some time kind of figuring out what one actually wants. And then also I think it's critical to think about what one is offering, because often one thinks, okay, I have this skill, I have these skills, I have these papers, I have this knowledge, and I apply for a job somewhere, but I also need to fit in. And I need kind of to ask myself, why would I be attractive for this place? Because the attractiveness is not just what I am and what I know and what I can do, what I have achieved, but I think it's also what this new environment would profit from recruiting me. And I think this is also a question which needs to be factored in if I kind of move from, I don't know, from University of Queensland to University of Sydney. Why would they attract me? What is appealing to them for attracting me? It's because in the end one is competing with other postdocs who also have their own skills. Someone tends to look kind of, looks only on one's own skill sets without thinking what one can actually bring to a new place. Does this make sense? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's always a value in actually moving institutions, whether it's nationally or going overseas.
Yeah.
A lot to be learnt. So we have one more question before we wrap up from our attendees. How has the field of, this is to the panelists, how has the field of postdoc health research changed during your time and today in terms of challenges and opportunities? So, looking back at your own journeys, is there anything that really stands out that applies to, for EMCRs today?
I think one of the exciting things that EMCRs have today are, well, number one, the hard thing is that they're dealing with less academic positions. They've got more PhDs coming through and less positions available for them. But they do have, there's much more of a knowledge about these positions in industry, these positions in government and other things that PhDs actually train you for. It doesn't need to be that sort of research academic role. There are these other roles available out there. And it wasn't that long ago that I went through this. We did not know about them then, but now there is this potential outside of academia, I think, for postdocs, which is really exciting.
Anyone else? Yes, go on.
What I want to say, just like, I think what's different today from maybe 20, 30 years ago is that there are mentors. There's a mentoring program, because I think this didn't exist at my time. And I think that's something great. And that has certainly changed. But at the same time, it has also become harder. Basically, since I came to Australia in 2005, funding has gone down dramatically. So I think it's much, much more challenging. I think a challenge here in Australia is that there's not a lot of industry. So let's say in the US or in Europe, at least you have a possibility to work for, let's say, for the pharmaceutical industry or biotech. And unfortunately, there are less opportunities here. And also because this is such a large country, it's kind of also difficult to transition from one job to another and then back again. In Europe, let's say you work in Luxembourg and then you work in, it's short distances everywhere, so it's much, much easier. I think it's a real challenge here. But then things again, I think in my view, they go through cycles. So sometimes things get harder and then it gets easier again. And even when I reflect on my own life, I had periods where it was tough and periods where it was less tough. And one just needs to be open for opportunities. I think what has also changed is a greater awareness also on the side of the supervisors that younger people need their own space. And so what I'm doing, for example, when I get invitations, for example, to write major reviews, I would participate PhD students and postdocs. And I think we heard it before, if it's absolutely critical kind of to have a reasonably long list of publications. And again, I think these days there's more awareness about what's required to make a career. I think there's more awareness that one needs to have first and last author papers. And I think it also helps, I mean, with the changed funding scheme for supervisors to involve postdocs and maybe also PhD students, ECRs and MCRs in grant submissions, just to make it easier for them to transition into independence. And I think what's absolutely critical is kind of, and we heard this also before, is kind of to come up with something as a selling point. Or I think when one needs to own a particular research area, to me, I think that's also critical. Let's say when it talks about a postdoc, when one knows, okay, this is a person who has expertise in X, Y, Z, or is known for X, Y, Z, and I think as a postdoc, one needs to work on this profile.
Yeah,
that's what I would say.
Thank you, Ergen, and I like that, you know, how you give your EMCR opportunity to build capacity by putting their names forward. And like Louise mentioned, when she was PhD, was that right? When you were just a PhD and you got, a CI on a grant. So, James, was that?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess the big difference from when I got going, there were much fewer opportunities, but relatively speaking, there was more money around. Success rates broadly were between 20 and 30%. And we used to complain our heads off about that. And, you know, and then in hindsight, you look back, actually, well, that was pretty good, really. But I think nowadays there are actually much more opportunities and many more ways of diversifying your career. So that if, you know, one door looks like it might be closing, then another door opens up in another direction. And I think it's just that thing is about staying open-minded about the opportunities that will arise, because you will have all sorts of skills, writing skills at the very least, and technical skills that will be valuable. And so it's really sometimes then thinking hard and getting advice about where they might take you. So I think the unfortunate thing is that, yes, the rate of funding is the worst I've ever seen it. It's just so much more competitive. And so you can be really an excellent early mid-career researcher and unfortunately still miss out because you might just fall on the wrong side of whatever that success rate is. But not to be discouraged, because I think, again, if you are competitive at those kinds of levels, then there'll be many other opportunities within academia and outside academia that you should consider as well.
Yeah. So the key message is never give up.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, you know, because you talk about the turning point as when you won the first grant, right, at the CIA, and a lot of us talking about, you know, the difficulties in getting the grant, both in the past and nowadays. So can you tell us what you need to prepare for a winning grant and how to write it?
I think we could probably make some money if we knew the answer to that.
Exactly.
Question, but I think there's look, I think most people probably on this video are really good researchers. On the panel and in the people who have joined us today as early career researchers are really good researchers. So I think sometimes it's not so much the quality of what we do, it's really, you know, I've often said it often depends on the psychology of the people you're writing the grants to. And so sometimes it's actually worth thinking about that a little bit. What sort of things if you were on a grant panel, what would be the things that you would value in terms of, you know, looking at probably literally dozens of applications. What makes a person stand out and give you some enthusiasm that they're likely to undertake that grant or that fellowship and be successful. So I think, yeah, putting yourself into the boots of the assessors and panel members, I think, can maybe be useful. But I think it's just so competitive that you can be really good and just miss out. And that's I think, a bit of the tragedy of the state of funding that we've got in Australia at the moment. It's probably not a great deal different anywhere else in the world, I suspect.
Yes, so the message is you have to persuade yourself, right? Be able to persuade yourself it is worth doing the research. And Katie?
Yeah, it is a big question, isn't it? How you do that. So, for me, it's absolutely doing that foundational work, really making sure that you have your networks, you have your 5-year plan, you have your this is what I'm about, you have all those things ready. So you've got that foundation of who you are and your focus. That, for me, you've got to do that before you move to the grant. Otherwise, you're just pulled in lots of directions. Take your time in doing that first grant. I'd say actually writing a grant, for me, the whole process and getting the team and everything together, it takes 6 months would be really short. It would probably take me a year. Okay, so when you see those emails popping up with the grant that is, oh, there's a deadline in a month, ignore it all. That is noise. Yeah, put it as that's an interesting scheme that is recurring, but avoid the noise and plan strategically for that grant that is that's realistic with everything else you're doing. Okay, I think reaching out is really important. So you've got your focus of what you want to do this grant on, but really make sure you've got that network who you're going to pull in, particularly people with lived experience, people that is critical. Is this important to them? You need that group that you have that network of people who have lived experience, who can see and help guide you with the research and the importance of it to people. I think whatever research we're doing, it's got to have that connection to how will it improve lives. It might not be now, but you've got to make that connection to how it can really change the world, even in a small way. How can it make that difference for people? And I think that has to then translate in your writing. You have to sell. It is a sell, and it is that, how do you take that research that is you're really passionate about and actually turn it into something that people can see? Almost like that first paragraph, you want that reviewer. Think of that reviewer who is on a plane. He or she is on a plane or a train. They've got a stack of emails and things to review, and they haven't had coffee yet, and they're squashed in the seat, and they have to review your grant, and so they're coming at it from a negativity. So you need that first bit for them to go, oh, that's so important. Oh no, is that happening? We've got to change this. You need that reaction. So, but that takes time to hone. And, sometimes it takes me a long time to go, how do we sell this? How do we really make it have that, grab people by the heart? Yes, you've got scientists reviewing this, but you've got lots of other people reviewing it as well. You'll have lay reviewers. You'll have people who are outside your discipline. So you need to be able to connect to them. So for me, that's the important thing. And yes, honestly, I've written so many grants that I haven't got. They're almost often the ones that I think are the best ideas. But I think that's on me. I didn't sell it sufficiently. I didn't get that message across. So, it's about just, the highs and lows of grant writing. You absolutely will. That when you get high, it's amazing. I had a call from one of my team a couple of weeks ago when we got through to the next round for grants. We were both, I was in the street, screaming, going, fantastic, this is brilliant. Those a great win. Now we've got to write that 30-page application that, plus all the detail, so that you're then down back to earth. But it's the highs and lows of grant writing. It is what it is, but it's also a craft. The more you do, the better you get at it. So don't give up, just go, yeah, okay, I didn't sell that one in the way I should do. What can I learn from that? How can I move on to the next? Okay, but yeah, it is worth it because doing the research is amazing. But yeah, you just got to keep going.
Thank you very much, Katie, for lots of great advice. Luis, winning both the grant, NIH grant and SMRC grant, you would like to add some comment on that?
I wanted to just say really quickly, apply for seed funding grants as the lead investigator, get that experience and get your name on other grants as a co-investigator, get that experience, show people that you know how to deliver small projects, and then you'll move on to the bigger projects, hopefully.
Okay, so I'm afraid that is all the time we have for the question now, and I would like to pass over to Kelsey to close the webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone for attending today, and a special thanks to our speakers, our speaker Katie Featherstone, and our panel members for a very informative and interesting discussion that we've had here today. Please keep an eye out for our next webinar, which will be coming up early next year, and hopefully we can all catch up again soon. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot.